Yes. Alrighty.
Okay, did anyone see Mind Your Own Business at the last Libertarian meeting? There we go. Well, it was basically a documentary, and I got the opportunity to meet this documentary maker, and one of his projects, upcoming projects, was global warming. And I already had the presentation created for global warming, so I figured let's toss it into a documentary. He was going to get to this on number 4 or 5 on his list. I figured we might be able to help move him up on the schedule if we just made a prototype for him, sent it to him and see what he thought. So we will be turning this into a documentary. If anyone wants to help me, I'm glad to have some help. Go ahead and watch the presentation and think about, if you would be interested in helping make a documentary. Let's see if we can get this thing rolling. It takes a couple seconds to fire. Yeah. It's a big documentary. Or big PowerPoint. Did anyone just come from that meeting over in, what was that?
Cotman Hall.
Cotman Hall. What do you think of that? Well, we're going to address a lot of those points that he addressed. But the difference of what he did and what we're going to do is everything I'm going to talk about today, you can get right here on the disc. This disc will have everything that you're going to see today. Every bit of research that I refer to will be on this. You just click on it and it'll take you to it so you can do the research. I found it very fascinating because he was pretty accurate. We just came from a presentation where the guy addressed skeptics, environmental skeptics. That's pretty much what I am. And he did a pretty good, accurate job of saying what they're going to address or what people like myself address. And we're going to take a look at it and see, let you decide, is this worth being skeptical about? I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm just going to simply show you the data. And when I'm showing you this data, I want you to think in terms of, does it make sense? Does it fit the scientific process? And most importantly, does the chart or the data that they have support the conclusion that they reach? How many people have seen Inconvenient Truth? Did anyone see Lori David here a couple weeks ago? Rats. You did?
Yeah.
Okay, can you remember that guy that asked the question about the chart?
Yeah.
Okay, what was her reaction?
God, I don't know. It's kind of a mix of, it's kind of general, like, taken abackness and, I don't know.
From your impression, why don't you give the audience a little description of what happened and what was the conclusion that she reached?
I just stepped in for a little bit. I honestly wasn't there for the whole presentation.
Well, I was the person who asked the question because their whole theory is based upon CO2 increasing, causing temperature to increase, right? So if you're going to have that as your theory, you better well have a chart that shows CO2 going higher and temperature going higher, right? And if your CO2 is making all-time highs by record levels, you would expect your temperature to be at least near an all-time high, right? That's logical, simple science, right? If one causes the other and one's making an all-time high by 33%, you better expect that your temperature's near an all-time high. Well, I pointed out to her that the chart in her movie doesn't even show that. Al Gore gets on this, it's a scene with the crane where Al Gore gets on it, goes up 12, 13 feet, and he points out that the CO2 is record high. Well, I pointed out in the question that if you look at the chart, temperatures are actually going down. And her reaction was basically shock. She got real defensive and she totally avoided the question. And you'll see a little bit later on why she avoided the question, because the entire foundation of her theory doesn't really hold water. But I'll let you decide.
If it doesn't, thingy thing, you can just click it.
Okay, click next. Okay. First of all, why would I be giving this to a libertarian group? Right? John Stossel is probably one of the most famous libertarians, and he spends a lot of time with global warming. Why would a libertarian kind of focus in on this subject? First of all, environmental policies often rob you of your freedoms and your liberty. They typically will use environmental policies to pass laws to basically control people or impact social change. Spotted owl is a good example, blocking ANWR drilling, a whole bunch of different things. DDT is a good one we'll get to. But typically, The environmentalists will use the government as a mechanism to force their beliefs upon society. And they often rob people of their life, liberty, and as you'll see, even life. Libertarians typically want smaller, more effective, and honest government. So if we're going to make policy changes based upon global warming science, we would want to make sure that this is an honest science, that it actually holds water, that it actually reaches the conclusion that the data points to. And last, of course, is the documentary. If anyone wants to help me make the documentary, I'd be glad to get some help. You'll see the PowerPoint can probably use some tune-up and video editing. I can use a little bit of help there. Next one. This is global warming. Once again, with this presentation, I encourage everyone to take the discs, make as many copies as you want, give them to all your professors that they want, discuss the science with your professors. I've got nothing to hide. What I'm doing is I'm using their data to make arguments against them. All right? And I'll have a dialogue with them. I won't be sitting there just giving you a one-way monologue. This is what the Union of Concerned Scientists point out. Man causes CO2 to increase. CO2 increases, traps solar energy, causes the globe to increase in temperature. Does anyone disagree with that? That's the whole theory, right? If now, speak up. Forever hold your peace. Okay, let's go on. This was recently given by John Hart here at Ohio State. These are his charts. CO2, world energy consumption, right? Now, when I'm looking at this, this looks pretty doggone convincing. You're burning petroleum, CO2 goes up. That looks pretty logical to me, right? That's a pretty doggone good case. A lot of correlation right there. This goes up, this goes up. Next. Okay. This is similar to the chart Al Gore shows where he gets on that crane, goes way up here. This level of CO2 is higher than any time before in history, right? This goes back 150,000 years, and CO2 is at 370 parts per million, right? A full 33% higher than ever before in history. Well, it happened this century. It has to be due to man. His title was Global Warming, Why the Skeptics Are Wrong. We're going to let you decide. Next. Okay? Temperatures. Here's a temperature graph. And look here at the end. This is what's called the hockey stick chart. This comes from the IPCC report, the National Panel of Climate Change. Okay? This is probably one of the most famous global warming charts out there. Once again, that temperature, it draws a line right here, 1998. That temperature is higher than anywhere else on this chart. Right? Next. First half of 2006, warmest on record in the U.S. Next. Undeniable global warming. There is a scientific consensus. Right? Nobody disagrees with this. Next. So what are the facts? Facts are CO2 is a global warming gas. Does anyone disagree with that? Man produces CO2. CO2 causes global warming. And man-made or anthropogenic CO2 is the main cause of global warming. Has anyone ever been told otherwise? Right? That's the whole theory. Al Gore made a movie on it. Well, let's go take a look and see how they made this movie and what's the whole basis of this. Right? Let's take a look at the next one. Well, let's step back for a second. You are fortunate to have not lived through the 70s, or at least probably remember it. I did. And back when I was a kid, I was scared to death not of global warming, but of a coming ice age. The same people that are telling you today that you're going through global warming, they told me I was going to be experiencing an ice age. This just happens to be out this week. This is a Newsweek article. They're going back and saying, remember global cooling? Here's a report called Global Cooling. That's what I experienced when I was a kid. Once again, with this